Oh, right, guys. Today we are going to be reacting to why Germans don't think like Americans. Jumping, guys.
And land is not just land. The size of a country you live in can change the way you see things. I feel like I always knew this subconsciously, but it wasn't until the other day on our app Quiver that another user made me think deeply about it. The prompt of the day was, what is something you like or admire about your home country? My answer had to do with how much I appreciate the size and different things the USA had to offer. Another user commented about how that large size could possibly affect the American mentality differences and attitudes compared to Germans. And you know what? She's right. And if you want to be a part of fun and unique conversations every day, join us on our app, Quiver. Let's get into it. So obviously Germany's layout means that people are living closer together. So there's a lot of interaction in shared spaces in Germany, like town squares, markets, or beer gardens, people living very close together. Germans are just used to being around other people. And they've got these kind of unspoken and some of them spoken and literal laws, these rules, to keep things running smoothly. For example, things like quiet hours. It's about keeping the peace when everyone's packed together into small spaces. In the US, space is not an issue at all. Homes are bigger, roads are bigger and wider. People expect a lot more personal space, as I've talked about on this channel many times.
Oh, poor Annie.
I'll sleep up top. Fine.
No, I'm up here.
We go Lanky's up top. That's why Americans can seem super individualistic. This also might be why we Americans have the stereotype of being pretty loud.
We are going into town right now.
We are going to town right now.
A lot of times there's a lot of space in between the other person that we're talking to. You want to step outside on your porch and say hi to your neighbor Bob across.
Yo, Portland, Oregon, right? It's beautiful, man. That area, Washington State, Oregon, Idaho, all that area is beautiful. It's gorgeous.
Across the street where there's kind of a lot of space, so you got to talk loud. Hey, Bob, how's it going? And then you just get kind of
used to it,
accustomed to always communicating loudly.
2 rebuys. You can do 2 rebuys max.
There has to be a limit if it's
2 rebuys max.
Because Germany is smaller and more centralized, they have got this culture where rules and regulations are just a part of life. You've heard me talk about this quite a bit, whether it's recycling, it's healthcare, or it's infrastructure. Germans expect the government to step in and make things work efficiently. It's like they trust the system to keep everything running fairly and smoothly. However, in the United States, things are a bit different. I mean, the sheer size of the country means that there's a lot of regional autonomy. Each state in the U.S. has kind of its own way of doing things. State laws are very important, and people are often skeptical of the federal governments, that's the national government, stepping in.
Yeah, that's what I say. I say we think differently, right? Although our system is very similar to you guys, our way of just seeing our governmental structures is very different. In a lot of ways, we don't trust our government, guys, because it's very inefficient. Guess what? It's very inefficient. You guys can see it with the healthcare. It's very inefficient, guys. It's very inefficient. So we think about the governmental structure very different.
Americans really like the value of individual rights, so you'll see a lot more debates about things like healthcare or even gun ownership. So I think these huge, vast areas of lands and these people that are living in pretty isolated situations where there's, miles and miles between them and the next person, you oftentimes find these type of people to be pretty libertarian.
It's a good thing you did today. You broke a rule. It shouldn't have been a rule in the first place. You did it for the right reasons. Thanks.
Who really want government to back off. They want to live their own life, be left alone. I'm also surprised that kind of libertarian movement is not bigger in Germany. Germany is a country that has suffered from 2 totalitarian governments in the 20th century. Yet, kind of this libertarian attitude does not really seem to be prominent. I know there is technically...
You know what? I think he has a good point, man. I mean, I used to live in a state that Wyoming, man, and a lot of people, they used to just think like this. They used to work for the oil rig, and they just wanted to just be left alone, man. Don't want to be part of anything. Just want to just work for the oil rig and just be there, and then just don't bother me. But that's interesting. Now that he mentioned that, it kind of clicked.
a
kind of
political
clicked.
party, the FDP, that's kind of leaning sort of that direction, but I think libertarian attitudes are much more prevalent in the United States.
Yep.
Look, and talking about these two different countries, Germany, the United States, well, sometimes it doesn't matter at all where you are in the world. And that's especially if you want to access certain things on the internet, because you can do that no matter where you are with cyber.
Ah, that was a nice curveball. That was a nice curveball. That was very nice.
Especially in public. Pilot also allows you to watch geoblock content that might not be available where you are. I use it all the time while I'm close together. The transportation system is super efficient for the most part. Of course, Deutsche Bahn has had its woes in recent memory, but you've got these trains running everywhere. You've got trams in the cities, and of course the Autobahn that's connecting the entire country. And it's not crazy at all to think about traveling from one end of Germany to the entire opposite end of Germany by train in a single
Wow.
day. I mean, you can go from a major city in the south, Munich, all the way up to a major city in the north,
München.
Hamburg, on the train in a half day.
Hamburg.
Imagine trying to do that with major cities on two different sides of the United States. You could take a train from New York to LA. Yeah, have fun. That's going to be about 3 days, and it's going to be way more expensive than just flying. Public transit, which people in Europe do like to criticize the United States for not really having public transportation systems or very limited public transportation systems. It does exist, but it's limited to the big cities. You know, New
Yeah.
York, for example, has a good public transportation system.
Good public
but
transportation. Good public transportation. Come on, man. That transportation stink, man. Yo, you have rats and picking up pizza on the floor. Yeah, I used to live in New York for 6 years. Man, you have to just watch your back, man. The homeless people are everywhere. I mean, you can say they works, but it's not efficient. It's not efficient. They always fixing the damn thing, always at the same time. The union is too strong. Like they cannot. The unions are so strong when every time they want to raise, they just stop the system. They just stop the system, man. I can go on.
Those places, of course, the car is the go-to. People that take long road trips, people
Yeah.
fly domestically. This is oftentimes a big criticism that Europeans have of Americans, that we take all of these domestic flights. Well, in Europe, you can take the train or you can drive 3 hours and be in a different country, in a different culture. For me, to visit my brother in Los Angeles from Portland, what am I going to drive there? It's like an 18-hour drive.
That's 13 hours is. Yeah, and that's considered short, by the way. That's far away, man. It took me about, I think it was like 20-something hours from moving from New York to Wisconsin. My father-in-law, he managed to drive 14 hours. I don't know how the hell he did it, but he managed to do it. But for me, it took me days, man, to just go from New York to Wisconsin the first time that I moved. But yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, that sounds about right, yeah.
I'm going to take a flight 2 hours because it is just that much more practical, and it's also cheaper. The size of Germany also makes environmental issues feel
Easier.
a bit more urgent, I would say. Space is limited, so things
Wow,
like
that's a good point, man. Yeah, because it's smaller. Well, but at the same time, you can be efficient. Yeah, it makes sense.
feel a bit more urgent, I
Yeah.
would say. Space is limited, so things like recycling and renewable energy
Yeah.
are just kind of more a part of the culture in Germany. Cities are designed to be walkable with bike lanes, pedestrian zones, and having, like I said, efficient public transportation. A lot of it is about sustainability. But in the US, there's kind of this sense of abundance. I mean, there's way more space, there are more resources, so this urgency that you see in Europe surrounding environmental issues
doesn't
and attitudes,
translate.
you don't often see or don't see as much in the United States. You see big suburbs, you see people totally dependent on cars, you see domestic flights. It kind of reflects this mindset. History and identity. Germany's smaller size and its central location right in the middle of Europe have made it into kind of the crossroads of cultures and conflicts. German history is everywhere. Castles, cathedrals, monuments that remind people of their shared past. That's why Germans tend to be so reflective and connected to their heritage, in my opinion. The US, on the other hand, it is kind of all about expansion and reinvention and innovation. The idea that the frontier is a big part of the American story.
Yeah.
It's kind of so ingrained into the American ethos. It's less about history and more about moving forward. So Americans are always looking to the future, which is exciting, of course, on one hand, and you get a lot of technological advancements, but sometimes it can feel like
we're going too much. We sometimes it feels like we're going way too fast. We have to pull our brake and just work in that, work on the fundamentals, right? Work on that fundamental, work in that structure. Make sure that if we're gonna keep going fast, we have to make sure that we're strong. Because if we don't have a strong fundamental, we're gonna just break in millions of pieces.
A little bit. So this one is a little bit of a fun one. How people think about time and distance. In Germany, where everything is pretty close, a 1-hour commute might feel like a big deal. And Germans, of course, love punctuality and efficiency, and German systems are built just around that. Being late isn't rude, it's unthinkable.
Yeah.
In the United States, people are much more used to traveling longer distance. A 2-hour drive to see friends, this is totally normal. This is totally doable within a day, even to go 2 hours there and 2 hours back.
Yep.
You talk to your average German, they're going to think that's crazy. They are not going to want to do that. If they're driving 2 hours, they are staying at least a night, probably more. Time for Americans feels a little bit more flexible because, honestly, the distances are just so much bigger. And I think this could explain why Americans can seem a little bit more relaxed about punctuality. Like, not me personally. Me personally, I have that German punctuality in me, and I despise when people are late. But I do think that this maybe could be a theoretical explanation.
Well, it also depends what area of the country. Like if you go more to the south, the southern area of the country, you might engage or you might encounter a lot of people not being punctual. Right now, the northern region, even in the middle of the Midwestern, I would say Tennessee and above, and a little bit to where he lived, punctuality is a big deal. Like I'm very punctual, right? I most of the time, arrive 5 to 2 minutes earlier, and punctuality is a big deal around here. But again, it all depends what kind of the regions of the country. I would say in the southern state, and I personally believe it's because of the weather. Because of the southern state, you have that gloomy kind of southern swampy, you know what I'm saying, and that makes people very, you know what I'm saying. It has to. It might have to do with that. It might have to do with that. People with the islands, they tend to be very flexible. Puerto Ricans, my goodness, man. If you say be there at 7:30, right? They're gonna start the party at 9:30, 2 hours after. And I never understood why, but going through a lot of aspects, I think personally has to do with the weather. A lot of with the weather. In the Asian countries, the same thing. Chinese, Koreans, and Japanese, they tend to be very, 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 very punctual. However, you go more to the southern areas of Asia, punctuality is not a big deal. So, given to Europe, it's the same thing. Spaniards are the same thing. Italians are the same thing. They're not Greeks. They're not into that punctuality. But the more northern you go, the more you can make the argument. Of course, that's just my opinion.
For why Americans are not necessarily known to have the same rigorous punctuality that Germans have. It's not that Americans don't care, it's just that things like traffic or long commutes are just a part of life. I mean, if you're living in Los Angeles and you show up late to the office, okay, yeah, they're going to be mad, but people are going to understand the traffic in LA is insane, and you have no other option but to take a car. So that is why maybe there's a little explanation there. If you've got any other differences that you think are explainable by the differences in
man, this video was fire. I loved it, man. Loved it. It just gave me a little bit of thinking to do. Love it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just, and it's also, let me just mention something, right? I do love the fact that Europe keeps a lot of their culture intact. And the reason I wanna say that is because a lot of Americans always want to know where their heritage comes from and they always like to go back to Europe. And that experience going back to Europe makes me understand more why they behave certain ways, why their communities were built certain way. It's a great way to communicate and connect with each culture. And then maybe like Nate said, you can become a very valuable asset not only for yourself but for your family. You learn these things that are very important, and all of a sudden here we are. Such a great video. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, guys. Like always, I'll see you next one.